Ambassador Vexthara of the Kurvani Collective had observed thousands of diplomatic sessions across 40 different species. She had seen the cold calculations of the Drelthian merchants, the precise logic of the Synthri philosophers, and the ancient patience of the Ylmer elders. In her 300 years of service, she believed she had witnessed every possible approach to interstellar negotiation. Then the humans arrived. The Great Council Chamber of Station Omega-7 was designed to intimidate. Its walls stretched upward for nearly 50 meters, covered in the flags and symbols of the 112 species that made up the Galactic Confederation. The lighting was kept deliberately dim, creating an atmosphere of serious contemplation. Temperature was regulated to a cool 15 degrees, considered optimal for clear thinking among most sentient species. Vexthara took her position at the central observation desk, her forearms folded in the traditional posture of neutral assessment. Her species, the Kurvani, had evolved beyond emotional responses approximately 40,000 years ago. They now served as the primary diplomatic observers for the Confederation, valued for their complete objectivity. The doors opened and the human delegation entered. There were 5 of them, led by a female named Ambassador Sarah Chun. Vexthara had read the preliminary files on humans with great interest. They were a young species, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 80 years ago. They came from a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. Nothing in their physical description suggested they would be particularly noteworthy, but something was different from the moment they walked in. Ambassador Chun smiled as she entered the chamber. It was a simple expression, just a slight upward curve of her lips, but Vexthara found herself leaning forward slightly. In her centuries of observation, she had never seen a diplomat smile upon entering a formal negotiation. The action seemed inappropriate, almost unprofessional. Yet the Drelthian trade minister, a cold creature of pure commerce, actually paused in his preparations to look at the human. Even the Synthri delegation, beings of pure logic who processed reality through mathematical equations, turned their sensor arrays toward Ambassador Chun. The human continued smiling as she approached her designated position at the negotiation table. She nodded to the other delegations, making direct visual contact with each representative. Vexthara noted that several of the alien diplomats seemed uncertain how to respond to this behavior. The negotiation was meant to address a territorial dispute in the Kepler expanse. 3 species claimed mining rights to the asteroid belt, designated KE-2847. The Drelthians wanted the rare minerals for profit. The Ylmer claimed the region held spiritual significance. The Vorathi insisted the asteroids contained resources essential to their species' survival. It was a complicated situation. Previous sessions had ended in deadlock. The Confederation Council had requested human participation as a neutral third party, hoping fresh perspectives might break the impasse. Vexthara activated her recording implants as Ambassador Chun stood to address the assembly. What happened next would later become required study material in diplomatic academies across the galaxy. Ambassador Chun did not begin with the traditional recitation of her credentials. She did not list the formal positions of her government. Instead, she looked at each of the disputing parties and spoke in a voice that carried something Vexthara could not immediately identify. She asked the Ylmer elder to describe why the region held spiritual meaning. The ancient being, over 8,000 years old, seemed surprised by the question. In formal negotiations, personal motivations were considered irrelevant. Only positions and demands mattered. But the Ylmer elder, after a moment of hesitation, began to speak about his people's history. He described how his ancestors had first traveled to the Kepler expanse thousands of years ago. He spoke of the ancient ceremonies conducted among those asteroids, the generations of his people who had found peace and wisdom in that distant place. His voice, usually flat and measured, began to carry something that Vexthara could only describe as sadness. Ambassador Chun listened. She did not interrupt. She did not check her data tablets or consult with her aides. She simply listened, her eyes focused entirely on the Yolmer elder, her expression shifting subtly as he spoke. When he finished, there was moisture in the corners of her eyes. Vexthara recorded this phenomenon with great interest. Her medical sensors indicated that Ambassador Chen was producing tears, a fluid typically associated with human distress responses. But the human was not in danger. She had simply listened to a story. The Yolmer elder noticed the tears as well. He stopped speaking and stared at the human with an expression that Vexthara had never seen on a Yolmer face before. Ambassador Chen apologized for the interruption. She explained that his story had moved her, that she felt genuine sorrow for the potential loss of something so meaningful to his people. The chamber fell completely silent. In 300 years, Vexthara had never witnessed this. Emotions were considered weaknesses in interstellar diplomacy. They clouded judgment. They interfered with rational decision-making. Every species learned to suppress emotional responses during formal negotiations. But Ambassador Chen was not suppressing anything. She then turned to the Varathi representative and asked about the resources they needed from the asteroids. The Varathi, a species of crystalline beings who communicated through vibrations, began to describe their situation. Their homeworld was dying. The minerals in the Kepler expanse contained elements essential for maintaining their planetary core. Without access to these resources, their entire species faced extinction within 3 generations. Ambassador Chen's expression changed as the Varathi spoke. Her features tightened. Her breathing quickened. When the Varathi finished, she placed her hand over her chest in a gesture that Vexthara's cultural database identified as indicating emotional pain. She told the Varathi that she understood their fear. She said that facing extinction was a horror that no species should endure. She made a promise that humanity would help find a solution that preserved the Varathi species. The Varathi representative, a being not known for emotional responses, vibrated at a frequency that Vexthara's sensors interpreted as surprise mixed with something else. Something unfamiliar. Hope. Finally, Ambassador Chen addressed the Drelthian trade minister. The Drelthians were the most calculating species in the known galaxy. They processed every interaction through cost-benefit analysis. Emotions were considered inefficiencies to be eliminated from all business dealings. Ambassador Chen did not ask the Drelthian about profit margins or market projections. Instead, she asked about the workers who would mine the asteroids. She asked about their families, their communities, the beings whose lives depended on the success of Drelthian commerce. The trade minister appeared confused by these questions. He explained that individual workers were irrelevant to the negotiation. Only aggregate resource extraction values mattered. Ambassador Chen disagreed respectfully. She argued that every being in the galaxy mattered, that no individual should be considered irrelevant. She spoke with a passion that made the temperature in the chamber seem to rise, despite the careful climate controls. Vexthara found herself making more notes than she had made in any previous observation session. Over the following hours, something remarkable happened. The human delegation did not approach the negotiation as a problem to be solved through logic alone. They approached it as a conflict between beings, each with legitimate needs and fears. Ambassador Chen expressed genuine anger when she learned that previous negotiations had been conducted without consideration for the Varathi extinction threat. Her face reddened. Her voice rose. The other human delegates shared her apparent distress. She expressed joy when the Yolmer elder revealed that spiritual ceremonies could potentially be conducted at multiple locations, not just the Kepler expanse. She actually laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the formal chamber, causing several alien delegates to look around in confusion. She expressed frustration when the Drelthian minister insisted that profit remained the only consideration. She argued with him directly, something rarely done in formal diplomacy. She challenged his positions. She demanded justification for his claims. And then, when the Drelthian finally admitted that his people were also facing economic pressure, That failure to secure new resources would mean collapse for many Drelthian trading families. Ambassador Chen expressed understanding. She reached across the table and touched the minister's arm. Physical contact during formal negotiations was almost unprecedented. The Drelthian froze, his compound eyes focusing on the human hand with what appeared to be complete confusion. Ambassador Chen told him that struggling to provide for one's family was something all beings understood. She said that wanting to succeed, wanting to protect those who depended on you, was not shameful. It was natural. It was right. The Drelthian minister did not move for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. By the end of the session, a preliminary agreement had been reached. The Ylmer would relocate their spiritual practices to a similar asteroid field nearby, with full Confederation support for establishing the new sacred site. The Vorathi would receive priority access to the life-saving minerals they needed. The Drelthians would coordinate extraction operations, ensuring their economic interests were preserved while respecting the needs of the other parties. It was a solution that had eluded diplomats for over 2 years of formal negotiations. Vexthara completed her observation report with unprecedented difficulty. She found herself struggling to categorize what she had witnessed. The humans had violated numerous established protocols. They had displayed emotional responses openly. They had touched other delegates. They had raised their voices, laughed, and shed tears during a formal session. By every measure of proper diplomatic conduct, they have behaved inappropriately. Yet they had achieved something that 300 years of proper conduct had failed to accomplish. As the delegations departed, Vexthara observed the other species watching the humans leave. The Ylmer elder approached Ambassador Chen and bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in his culture. The Vorathi representative vibrated a frequency that translated roughly as eternal gratitude. Even the Drelthian minister paused to nod. At the human delegation before departing, Ambassador Chen smiled at each of them. Just smiled. That simple expression that had seemed so strange when she first entered. Vexthara added a final note to her report. She recommended that the diplomatic corps conduct extensive studies of human negotiation techniques. She suggested that the long-held assumption about emotions being diplomatic weaknesses might need revision. She hesitated before adding her personal observation. In her 300 years of service, she had learned that pure logic could solve problems, but it could not heal divisions. She had learned that cold calculation could produce agreements, but not understanding. The humans had brought something different to the negotiation chamber. They had brought themselves, fully and openly, with all their impractical emotions on display. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Vexthara saved her report and sat alone in the empty chamber for a long time afterward. For the first time in her long career, she found herself wondering what it might feel like to smile. She did not know the answer. But watching the humans, she had seen something she had never expected to find in a diplomatic session. She had seen connection. Real connection between beings who had entered as opponents and left as something approaching allies. Perhaps, she thought, the Kovani had been wrong about emotions all along. Perhaps what they had evolved beyond was not weakness at all. Perhaps it was the very thing that made cooperation possible. She would need to consider this further. The implications were significant. But for now, she simply recorded her observations and noted that human representatives displayed genuine emotion during formal negotiation sessions. And somehow, remarkably, it made all the difference.